It was supposed to be Titan Tech's most triumphant day, the culmination of 5 years of innovation, sleepless nights, and a billion-dollar gamble on a revolutionary data security platform set to disrupt the tech world and redefine how corporations protect sensitive information. The company headquarters, a sleek glass tower in downtown Manhattan, buzzed with adrenaline and pride as the launch presentation streamed to global investors and media outlets in real time. The executive boardroom was packed with top brass engineers, lawyers, and investors, every screen glowing with Titan Tech branding, every hand holding champagne glasses in anticipation of history being made. At the head of the table stood Marla Trenton, the company's CEO, a woman who had clawed her way to the top through grit, brilliance, and an unshakable will to dominate. Marla was known for being exacting, relentless, and brilliant, the kind of leader who could turn a quarterly loss into a global acquisition. Today was her victory lap. But 38 minutes into the presentation, as the lead engineer prepared to unveil the live prototype, the moment that would showcase the real-time capabilities of the new system, everything went dark. First, the demo screen froze. Then, the auxiliary feeds dropped. Laptops across the room blinked into blackness as the internal network collapsed without warning. Seconds later, cell phones lit up with emergency alerts, emails undeliverable, servers unreachable, internal tools inaccessible. Panic crept in. The celebratory mood shattered like glass. A stunned silence filled the room as the presentation feed to thousands of investors worldwide was abruptly cut. For the first time in her entire career, Marla's voice faltered. "Get IT in here now," she barked, slamming her fist on the table. The tech team stormed in, led by CTO Greg Halpern, who looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. They huddled around blinking consoles, rebooting servers, poring over logs. Nothing made sense. It wasn't just a crash, it was a cascading failure that defied their backup protocols and security layers. Meanwhile, investors were texting, calling, demanding answers. The company's stock price dipped in real time. Staff whispered about potential sabotage. Cameras rolled silently as the boardroom descended into chaos. Amidst this frenzy, no one noticed a quiet figure standing just outside the glass walls of the conference room. 15-year-old Aiden Clark, the janitor's son, stood holding a mop handle and a bag of trash, eyes glued to the blinking error messages on the engineer's screens. He had been cleaning floors in that building every night since his dad got the custodial contract. While most kids played video games, Aiden spent those nights on a second-hand laptop his dad had bought from a pawn shop, learning to code from free online tutorials, watching cybersecurity seminars on YouTube, and building simulations in his spare time. He had always been invisible to the executives, just another shadow in the polished halls. But Aiden loved systems. He loved puzzles. And what he saw on those crashing monitors wasn't random failure, was a pattern, eerily familiar to something he had studied weeks earlier. A rare exploit buried deep in update pipelines that could bypass even the most advanced firewalls if triggered during a live deployment. Aiden hesitated, his heart pounding. What could he do? He was just the janitor's kid. No credentials, no authority. But watching the chaos unfold, he felt a fire rise in his chest. He took a breath and stepped through the glass door, quietly walking toward the cluster of frantic engineers. At first, no one even looked at him. When he cleared his throat and said, "I think I know what's happening," a junior tech waved him off. "Not now, kid. We're in the middle of a crisis." But Aiden didn't back down. He pointed to the cascading failure logs and said, more firmly this time, "You're looking in the wrong place. It's not just a system failure. It's an embedded breach, probably planted weeks ago. If you reboot again without isolating it, you're going to trigger a recursive loop and lose everything permanently." That got their attention. Greg turned. staring at the boy with a mixture of disbelief and exhaustion. And how would you know that? Aiden didn't blink, because I modeled it. I ran a simulation of this exact exploit 2 months ago. It's obscure, but it follows a very specific failure fingerprint. Your logs match it exactly. Greg hesitated, then waved him forward. Show me. And as Aiden stepped up to the main console and began typing with quiet precision. No one in that room, not even Marla Trenton herself, had the faintest idea that the janitor's son was about to change everything. As the boardroom trembled with mounting anxiety and frantic commands echoed through every corridor of Titan Tech's headquarters, Aiden stood at the epicenter of a corporate storm, surrounded by towering adults in tailored suits and panic-stricken engineers who hadn't slept in days, their confidence now shattered by the inexplicable implosion of a system they had spent years perfecting. And yet, there he was, skinny teenager in a faded hoodie, his sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished marble as he leaned forward toward the console, fingers twitching slightly with a mixture of nerves and instinctive excitement, because this was not just a moment to him. This was the culmination of every silent night spent behind a mop, every late shift accompanying his father through the glass halls of a place he could only dream of belonging to. And though the world had never looked his way, the code now stared back at him like a challenge he was born to meet. When Greg Halpern, the grizzled CTO whose career now hung by a thread, reluctantly stepped aside and let Aiden take a seat at the main terminal, a ripple of disbelief spread across the room as executives exchanged incredulous looks. What could a janitor's son possibly know that the best-paid minds in tech had missed? But Aiden didn't waste time arguing. His hands flew across the keyboard, calling up error logs, system paths, kernel traces, and injection patterns at a pace no one expected, his mind recalling not just the simulations he had run, but the hundreds of hours he had spent buried in white papers, hacker forums, and cybersecurity puzzles, solving theoretical breaches no one paid attention to. And now one of them was here, live, real, dangerous. He recognized the signature of the breach instantly, a polymorphic payload embedded inside the deployment scripts of the new product update, disguised as a benign routine, but with a trigger that activated when specific environmental conditions were met, namely during a public demonstration with real-time access permissions. And what made it worse was that it wasn't just a crash mechanism, but a siphoning tool, meant to copy and leak sensitive data before destroying the audit trail. This wasn't just a malfunction, it was an inside job, a digital Trojan horse cleverly timed to sabotage Titan Tech when the world was watching. Aiden mapped the propagation vectors, isolating compromised branches of the code tree with stunning efficiency, narrating his process out loud not to impress, but because he needed the engineers to keep up. And slowly, reluctantly, they began following his lead, marveling at how this uncredentialed teen not only understood the architecture better than some of their senior developers, but also anticipated each move of the breach before their own software could detect it. Marla Trenton, whose composure had cracked earlier, stood motionless near the wall, arms folded tightly across her chest, watching this boy who had appeared out of nowhere take command of her company's darkest hour with the calm of a seasoned war general. And part of her wanted to dismiss it as absurd, a fluke. But the undeniable truth was playing out in front of her eyes. Every second he worked, systems came back online, nodes began responding, and the core framework of Titan Tech's infrastructure began to stabilize under his control. Meanwhile, the investors who had been furiously texting and calling a moment ago were now watching a paused feed that suddenly came back to life, first flickering, then broadcasting a full diagnostic screen showing restored connections and active countermeasures being deployed in real time. Aiden executed a purge command on the final infected segment, trapping the attacker's digital signature inside a honeypot folder he created on the fly, effectively turning the breach into evidence. The room exploded in disbelief when the final server turned green, and the internal comes buzzed with reports of recovery from every department. But Aiden wasn't done. He brought up a screen no one else had dared access yet: the admin logs, tracing the origin of the malicious code to a user ID from Titan Tech's own executive development division, a betrayal that sent gasps through the room as names scrolled by, and everyone realized this wasn't just a tech failure, but a corporate sabotage attempt designed to coincide with the most public moment in the company's history. Greg Halpern staggered back and sat down hard, eyes wide with the realization that they had almost walked into oblivion had it not been for this kid. Marla, never one to show emotion, felt something strange stir inside her, a blend of awe, guilt, and a sharp sting of humility. She walked up to Aiden as he logged off the terminal and simply asked, "How did you learn to do all of that?" To which he replied, without pride or pretense, just practice and curiosity. "I like solving things," and in that moment, every suit in the room saw what they had been blind to for years. Genius doesn't always wear a badge or sit in a corner office sometimes. It pushes a mop while dreaming of keys and code, and as the dust settled and the recovery team moved in, Aiden turned to leave, assuming his role was over. But Marla stopped him with a single command: "Wait. You're not going anywhere." And for the first time since the system went down, hope returned to the room. Not because the machines were fixed, but because they had just discovered something infinitely more valuable: a mind that saw solutions where others saw chaos, a voice that spoke truth where others doubted, and a new kind of leader born not from title or pedigree, but from raw, undeniable brilliance. The following day began with a strange stillness inside Titan Tech's monolithic glass tower, a building once teeming with ego and calculation, now subdued by the ripple effect of what had occurred the night before, the silence that followed. A digital apocalypse narrowly averted, not by any C-suite executive or industry-renowned engineer, but by a teenage boy who had never set foot inside a boardroom before yesterday. A boy whose name they now whispered through every department like a myth made real: Aiden, the janitor's son, the unknown who had saved everything. And while Marla Trenton's polished heels echoed through the main hallway en route to an emergency executive summit, her thoughts were not on the usual market figures or damage control, but on the strange mixture of awe, gratitude, and reevaluation that had kept her awake all night. Because in every critical analysis of Titan Tech's failure and recovery, Aiden's fingerprints glowed like a roadmap to salvation. His brilliance, a flare that had exposed not just a security breach, but a company-wide blindness to talent that didn't wear a lanyard, didn't boast a Stanford degree, and didn't know how to play the corporate game yet, had still managed to outthink every single person on payroll. Upstairs, as the senior leadership assembled with furrowed brows and sharpened egos, trying to spin the crisis into a manageable narrative, Marla walked in and cut through their posturing like a blade. "We almost lost everything because we couldn't see past our own damn hierarchy," she said, her voice cold steel, her eyes flint. And before they could argue or interject, she continued, "That boy did more in 15 minutes than some of you have done in 15 months. And we need to make a decision right now. Either we bring him in, elevate him, and invest in that brain, or we continue the illusion that we know what we're doing and wait for the next crash to bury us." The room fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the CFO's quiet admission that Aiden had not only stopped the exploit, but had actually improved the system's resilience with a patch so elegant their cybersecurity firm now wanted to license it. Meanwhile, in the janitor's lounge 3 floors down, Aiden sat next to his dad, sipping orange soda from a vending machine and trying to process the attention that had suddenly exploded around him, fielding text messages from engineers, invites, to meetings, and even a request from Titan Tech's internal newsletter for an interview, all of which felt surreal compared to his nightly routine of polishing floors and checking trash bins. He kept looking at his dad, hoping for guidance, but the old man only smiled and said, "You already earned it, son." Now they'd just catching up, and something in Aiden's chest tightened, a mix of pride and fear. Because for the first time in his life, he was being seen not as the janitor's kid tagging along, but as someone who might actually belong. Within hours, he was summoned upstairs, where instead of the usual security checkpoints and confused glances, he was met by a red carpet of invitation. Marla herself waiting outside the boardroom, greeting him with the rare smile of someone who'd been proven wrong and was glad for it, and behind her, an entire room of executives who rose to their feet as he entered, not out of ceremony, but respect. They offered him a position on Titan Tech's Elite Innovation Task Force, a private workspace, mentorship from top-tier engineers, and a contract that made his father tear up in silence when he finally saw it. But Aiden, grounded by years of being invisible, didn't jump at the offer. He asked questions, challenged terms, proposed new security protocols, and shocked the room again by suggesting a company-wide audit for hidden talent like himself. Individuals overlooked because they didn't fit the mold. And when he spoke, the room listened, not because he was loud, but because everything he said rang with the clarity of someone who had seen the system from the bottom up and found the flaws no one else dared to admit. Later that week, Titan Tech held a press conference not to spin the crash, but to announce the young man who prevented it, presenting Aiden not as a fluke or a miracle, but as the face of a new initiative to rethink how innovation is cultivated. And when cameras flashed and headlines read, "Janitor's Son Saves Billion-Dollar Launch," Aiden stood awkwardly in front of the mic, scratching the back of his neck, eyes flicking nervously to his dad at the edge of the stage. And when asked how it felt to go from invisible to indispensable, he replied, "It feels like I'm just getting started." And indeed he was, because while the system had nearly broken him by ignoring his worth, he had just rewritten the rules of who gets a seat at the tableland from this day forward. He wouldn't just sit there quietly. He would lead, and the world was finally watching. In the days that followed the revelation of Aiden's brilliance, the world didn't just notice, they stopped, stared, and redefined what they believed about genius, about humility, and about where real change could come from. And as news cameras flooded the lobby of Titan Tech and social media exploded with hashtags like #JanitorSon, #AidenEffect, and #TechForAll, the young man at the center of the storm found himself in a whirlwind of attention he'd never asked for, but was now tasked with navigating. The media hailed him as a prodigy, but Aiden remained grounded, refusing interviews that felt like spectacle, turning down invitations from tech titans who wanted to parade him as a token, instead channeling his focus toward something more enduring. His moment not just for himself, but for others who, like him, had brilliance buried beneath struggle and silence. Behind the scenes, Marla Trenton underwent a transformation just as profound. The once calculating CEO, now humbled by what she had nearly missed and determined to rebuild Titan Tech's legacy from the inside out, not through market dominance or clever PR, but through transparency, inclusion, and the creation of genuine opportunities for those so often left behind. And in a rare live television appearance that aired globally, she looked straight into the camera, admitted her blind spots, thanked Aiden publicly, and announced the formation of the Aiden Initiative, a nationwide incubator program aimed at identifying, nurturing, and funding young minds from underserved backgrounds with a vision to rewrite the future of technology, not for profit first, but for people. She offered Aiden a full scholarship to the university of his choice, a leadership track internship within Titan Tech's R&D department, and for his father, who had cleaned the building's floors for over 2 decades without once being invited. To a company's celebration, a managerial promotion, full benefits, and a generous equity stake that made him, overnight, one of the company's most respected employees. The applause that followed wasn't just for the gesture, was for the symbolic reversal of a system that had long been tilted in favor of the privileged few. Within months, the Aiden Initiative launched pilot programs in 5 major cities, attracting thousands of applicants and igniting grassroots excitement among educators, community leaders, and students who saw in Aiden not a distant genius, but a mirror of their own potential. And while Titan Tech stock surged, was the cultural shift that mattered more. Engineers now routinely rotated through mentorship roles. Corporate leadership attended listening sessions with frontline staff, and recruiting criteria were expanded beyond elite resumes to include real-world problem-solving, passion projects, and even street-honed skills that had long been dismissed. Aiden, meanwhile, quietly grew into his role, collaborating with cyber defense units, contributing to next-gen AI safety models, and mentoring peers in the initiative bearing his name, his story proving not only that talent could come from anywhere, but that when nurtured with respect and opportunity, it could change everything. His father, often spotted walking through Titan Tech's halls in a tailored suit but still wearing the same gentle smile, would remind executives and interns alike, titles don't make you important, what you give back does, and those words began appearing in company newsletters, office posters, even classroom chalkboards. A year later, when Titan Tech was awarded the Global Tech Humanitarian Award, it wasn't just for innovation or profit, it was for proving that people mattered most. And the moment Aiden accepted the honor on behalf of the company, he stood before world leaders, educators, and students and said, "I was the janitor's son, and now I lead engineers, not because I'm special, but because someone finally looked beyond the surface." Let this be the beginning, not the exception. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for him, it was for every overlooked dream, every dismissed idea, every voice that had gone unheard for too long. And as he stepped down from the stage, cameras flashing, hearts lifted, and the future shifting beneath their feet, Aiden knew this was never about one boy and a broken system. It was about lighting a path wide enough for millions to walk through. Because in that moment, the janitor's son wasn't just a hero, he was a movement, a promise, a spark that changed everything.